The Warsaw Uprising or Warsaw Uprising was one of the most terrible events in the history of World War II, which occurred in Poland in 1944. The war was an attempt by Polish resistance forces, known as the Armia Krajowa, Fatherland Army, to liberate Warsaw from Nazi German occupation. In the summer of 1944, Allied forces were advancing in Europe, and the Soviet Red Army was approaching the Polish border after pushing back German forces from Soviet territory. Armia Krajowa, who was part of the Polish resistance movement, decided to launch an uprising in Warsaw in the hope of liberating the city before Soviet troops arrived. Their goal was to secure Poland's independence from German domination and, at the same time, prevent Soviet domination. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany launched its invasion of Poland, marking the start of World War II. Within a few weeks, Poland was also invaded by the Soviet Union from the east, based on a secret agreement in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. With two great powers attacking from two sides, Poland quickly fell, and its territory was divided between the Germans and the Soviets. During the occupation, the Polish people experienced brutal oppression. Under the German regime, some 6 million Poles, including 3 million Jews, were murdered in the Holocaust and other acts of violence. Life in Warsaw, as a center of resistance and a symbol of Polish culture, suffered greatly. In mid-1944, the situation on the Eastern European front changed drastically. The Soviet Red Army, which had previously succeeded in pushing back German troops from Soviet territory, had now reached the Polish border. At the same time, the Polish resistance, which had been preparing for years, saw an opportunity to liberate Warsaw before the Soviets arrived. They hoped that by capturing the city, they could strengthen Poland's post-war political position and prevent Soviet domination. However, this strategy was fraught with risks. Although there was hope that the Western Allies or the Red Army would support the rebellion, there was no guarantee that help would arrive in a timely manner. Despite this uncertainty, the leadership of Armia Krajowa decided to launch a rebellion under the code W. On August 1, 1944, at 17:00, thousands of Armia Krajowa members and lightly armed civilians launched an attack on German positions throughout Warsaw. Initially, they managed to capture several strategic areas, including the central city district, and cut German lines of communication. They also controlled a number of important buildings, such as government offices, police headquarters, and military posts. Morale among the fighters was very high, and the people of Warsaw welcomed them enthusiastically. Civilians soon joined the resistance, setting up barricades, and helping in various ways, such as caring for the wounded and providing food. In the first few days, it looked as though the rebellion might be successful. However, this initial victory did not last long. The German government immediately realized the threat of this uprising and decided to crush it with brutal violence. They sent reinforcements to Warsaw, including the notorious SS troops and special units equipped with tanks and heavy artillery. Their goal was clear: to crush the rebellion and punish the city cruelly. The fighting in Warsaw soon turned into a vicious urban war. The Germans did not hesitate to use heavy weapons in densely populated neighborhoods, destroying buildings and killing many civilians. In many parts of the city, fighting went house to house, with Polish fighters defending their positions fiercely. Despite lacking weapons and ammunition, Armia Krajowa held out tenaciously for weeks. Outside the battlefield, Armia Krajowa and the Polish government in exile continued to hope that the Allies would provide support. However, the political and military situation in Europe makes it difficult to realize this assistance. Western Allied forces were deep in Western Europe, and although there were several attempts to drop supplies by air, their numbers were insufficient to change the course of the war. On the other hand, the Soviet Red Army, located across the Vistula River, outside Warsaw, was seen as the rebels' greatest hope. However, Stalin had his own political agenda. He did not want to aid an uprising led by forces loyal to the Polish government in exile, which he saw as a threat to Soviet plans to dominate post-war Poland. As a result, the Red Army did not launch an offensive in support of the rebellion, even though they were in a position to do so. This was considered by many Poles to be a form of betrayal. As time went by, conditions in Warsaw worsened. Food, water and medicine stocks are running low. Makeshift hospitals are overflowing with wounded, while fighters are increasingly exhausted and low on ammunition. Despite this, the spirit of resistance remained high, and Polish fighters continued to fight bravely. At some point, civilians who were not involved in the fighting also became targets of German atrocities. The Wola district, for example, witnessed mass massacres, in which thousands of civilians, including women and children, were systematically killed by German troops. This massacre was part of an effort to intimidate Polish fighters. After 63 days of fierce and bloody fighting, Armia Krajowa finally had no choice but to surrender. On October 2, 1944, the surrender agreement was signed. The remaining Polish fighters were allowed to leave the city as prisoners of war, while surviving civilians were evacuated from Warsaw. The Germans, in retaliation for this uprising, proceeded to destroy what was left of the city. By the end of the year, about 85% of Warsaw had been destroyed, both by fighting and by systematic scorched earth operations by German forces.
Halo, czy nas słyszycie? To nasz ostatni komunikat. Dziś oddziały niemieckie wkroczyły do Warszawy. Braterskie pozdrowienie przesyłamy żołnierzom polskim walczącym na Helu i wszystkim walczącym gdziekolwiek się jeszcze znajdują. Jeszcze Polska nie zginęła. Niech żyje Polska!